My name is Daniel Harris, and what I'm about to tell you is not a campfire story or a creepy internet legend. This is something I lived through, something that still wakes me up drenched in sweat at 3 a.m. It's the reason I no longer go camping, no longer stay in remote places, and the reason I never answer blocked numbers anymore. Back in 2012, I was 24, fresh out of college, and working in a small IT company in upstate New York. I had a small circle of friends, people I'd known since high school, who loved going out into the woods for weekend getaways. Our favorite spot was a place called Blackwood Forest, a sprawling reserve about 40 miles from town. There was an old log cabin deep inside the woods, abandoned decades ago but still standing. Locals said hunters used it sometimes, though no one really maintained it. It was half falling apart, but for us, it was perfect, a creepy, private place to drink, tell stories, and feel like we were miles away from the world. One Friday in November, my friend Kyle called me out of nowhere. His voice was oddly cheerful. "Hey, man, we're doing Blackwood this weekend. Everyone's in. You coming, right?" It was strange because we hadn't gone there in almost 2 years. The last time, we'd had a terrifying night where something, or someone, knocked on the cabin door at 2 a.m. When Kyle opened it, no one was there. Just deep footprints in the snow leading into the trees. After that, the group kind of stopped going. I hesitated, but Kyle laughed it off. "Don't be a baby. It'll be fun. One last trip before winter buries the place." I finally agreed. That decision haunts me to this day. We drove up Saturday afternoon. There were 4 of us, me, Kyle, my best friend Marcus, and a girl named Emily who'd recently started hanging out with us. She was quiet, always on her phone, but she had this nervous energy that put me on edge. The deeper we drove into the forest, the more uneasy I felt. The trees looked skeletal without their leaves, and the late autumn air carried that heavy silence that makes every sound seem sharper. When we finally reached the cabin, it was worse than I remembered. The wood was warped, the windows cracked, and the roof sagged under the weight of damp leaves. But Kyle was grinning like a kid. Inside, it smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. Rats scurried in the corners. We set up sleeping bags, lit a fire in the old stone fireplace, and tried to make the place livable. By nightfall, we were drinking and joking, the fear melting away. Emily sat by the fire, scrolling through her phone. At one point, she frowned. "You guys have service out here?" she asked. We checked our phones. No bars. She looked confused. "That's weird. I just got a text." She didn't show us what it said. Around 11 p.m., Marcus went outside to relieve himself. He came back looking pale. "Did one of you move the car?" We all shook our heads. He swallowed hard. "It's gone." At first, we thought he was messing with us. But when we stepped outside, the car was nowhere in sight. The dirt trail we drove up on was empty, tire marks leading back toward the main road. Panic set in immediately. We were miles from town, with no cell service. Kyle swore he locked the doors. Then Emily said something that chilled me. "Someone's watching us." She was staring into the woods, her phone light trembling in her hand. I followed her gaze and swore I saw movement, a tall shadow between the trees, just at the edge of the firelight. We barricaded the cabin door with a broken chair. None of us slept. Around 2 a.m., just as the fire was dying, we heard it. Tap. 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 It was faint, coming from one of the cracked windows. Kyle shouted, "Who's out there?" but there was no reply. Just silence. Then, the tapping moved, to the wall, then the back door, then the window near Emily. She started crying, whispering, "Make it stop, make it stop." When I finally shone my flashlight toward the window, I caught a glimpse of something that froze my blood. A face. Not pressed against the glass, but painted on it. A crude, charcoal-like smear of a face, wide eyes, and a crooked mouth. And it hadn't been there before. By dawn, we were a wreck. The tapping had stopped sometime around 4 a.m., but the painted face remained. We decided to leave on foot, find the road, and get help. We packed up quickly, but when we turned to wake Emily, she was gone. Her sleeping bag was empty. Her phone lay on the floor, cracked. There were no footprints leading out of the cabin. No broken door. No open window. She was just gone. Marcus lost it, screaming her name, running outside into the trees. Kyle and I tried to stop him, but he vanished into the forest, his voice fading. I never saw him again. By mid-morning, Kyle and I stumbled out of the woods onto the main road. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely walk. We flagged down a passing truck. The driver, an older man, looked terrified when we told him where we'd come from. "You boys shouldn't have gone near that place," he muttered. "Blackwood Cabin's been empty for 30 years. Folks go missing out there." We reported Emily and Marcus to the police. Search teams combed the woods for days. Nothing. No bodies, no footprints, no sign they'd ever been there. When the police checked the cabin, the face on the window was gone. But scratched into the wood of the back door were 4 words. "We take them back." It's been over a decade since that night. Kyle doesn't talk about it anymore. He moved across the country, cut ties with most people, and drinks too much. I still get calls sometimes, blocked numbers, usually late at night. When I answer, there's only silence. But once I heard Emily's voice. "Why didn't you stay?" she whispered. I dropped the phone, shaking so hard I thought I'd pass out. No one believes me. They say Emily and Marcus probably ran off together, or that we were drunk and got lost. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that whatever lives in Blackwood Cabin is still there, waiting. My name is Jonathan Reeves. I used to work as a freelance journalist covering small-town crime stories for regional newspapers. I've written about murders, missing people, strange accidents, but nothing prepared me for what I'm about to tell you. This happened in 2016, in a rural part of Pennsylvania. I received a phone call from a woman named Sandra Miller, who claimed her younger brother had gone missing under bizarre circumstances. The police report described it as a disappearance in a remote area, but the details Sandra gave me were far darker. Her family owned a piece of land outside the town of Bellbrook. They called it Miller's Farm, though it hadn't been a working farm in decades. According to Sandra, her brother Thomas had gone out there one night with friends and never came back. The police searched the property but claimed there was nothing unusual. Sandra disagreed. She said there were things the police weren't telling anyone. Things that terrified her. At first, I thought it would be just another story of careless teenagers and a missing person case. But when I arrived in Bellbrook, I quickly realized something was very, very wrong. Miller's Farm was about 7 miles outside of town, down a cracked asphalt road lined with dense woods. When I first saw it, I understood why locals whispered about the place. The farmhouse was collapsing in on itself, its windows shattered, its roof sagging with rot. The barn stood like a hulking shadow behind it, its doors chained shut with heavy rusted locks. Weeds grew waist-high across the property, and the air smelled faintly of something rancid, like spoiled meat. Sandra met me there, clutching a folder of photographs. She was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "They don't want to hear it," she told me. "The police, the town, they all know what that place is, but they won't talk about it." I asked her what she meant. She showed me a photo taken on her phone the night before Thomas disappeared. It was blurry, shot in the dark, but in the corner of the frame, just behind the barn, you could make out a tall figure. Thin, unnaturally thin. When I asked if it could have been a trick of the light, Sandra shook her head violently. "I heard it, too," she whispered. "I heard it breathing." According to Sandra, it happened 3 weeks earlier. Thomas and 2 of his friends, Ryan and Beth, went to the farm late at night. They'd been drinking, showing off, daring each other to explore the barn. The barn had a reputation in town. Kids called it the throat because, when you stood inside, every sound you made seemed to echo unnaturally, as though the building itself were swallowing your voice. Sandra showed me texts Thomas had sent her around midnight. "We're inside the barn. It smells so bad in here. Something's moving. Thought it was a rat, but it's big. I don't like this." Beth's freaking out. Those were the last messages she ever got from him. The next morning, Ryan was found wandering along the road, half naked, covered in scratches, and in shock. He wouldn't speak. Beth was never found. And Thomas, gone, without a trace. The police chalked it up to drinking, maybe drugs. They searched the barn but claimed it was empty. But Sandra swore she went back herself the following day. And what she saw made her run screaming. I didn't want to believe her. But when Sandra begged me to see it for myself, I agreed. We returned at dusk. The locks on the barn door were broken, as though someone had forced them open. The air inside was suffocating, thick with the stench of rot and mold. My flashlight beam cut across rusted tools, rotting hay bales, and strange markings on the walls. At first, I thought they were graffiti. But when I looked closer, my stomach turned. They weren't painted. They were scratched into the wood. Symbols I didn't recognize. Circles intersected with jagged lines. Crude shapes that looked like distorted human faces. And the sound. At first, it was faint. A low hum, like air rushing through a pipe. But the deeper we went into the barn, the louder it became. It wasn't air. It wasn't machinery. It sounded like breathing. That's when Sandra grabbed my arm. Her hand was trembling. She pointed at the far wall. There was a door I hadn't noticed before. Small, almost hidden, half buried behind old boards. It looked like it led underground. And carved into it, over and over, were 3 words. Feed us more. The next day, I arranged to meet Ryan, the only survivor. His parents didn't want him to talk, but I convinced them it might help him heal. Ryan looked like a ghost. Thin, pale, his eyes hollow. When I asked him about the barn, his hands shook violently. At first, he just mumbled. Then, suddenly, he shouted. It wasn't a person. He covered his face and started crying. I pressed him gently, and slowly, between sobs, he told me what happened. When they entered the barn, the smell was unbearable. They joked about it, tried to act tough. But then they heard something moving in the loft. Thomas climbed the ladder, shined his phone light, and froze. Ryan said there was something up there. Something hunched and long-limbed, with skin like ash. It didn't move like an animal. It crawled backward, bending in ways that made no sense. Beth screamed. The thing dropped from the loft, landing in the hay with a sickening thud. That was when Thomas yelled for them to run. Ryan remembered the sound of bones cracking. Beth's screams. And then, nothing. He woke up on the road hours later, with no memory of how he got there. When I asked what happened to Thomas, Ryan whispered something I will never forget. It dragged him through the floor. I wanted to dismiss it as trauma, hallucinations. But the more I investigated, the more disturbing the truth became. Old town records showed that Miller's farm was built on land once owned by the Bellbrook Asylum in the 1920s. The asylum was notorious for cruel experiments, patients locked in underground cells, left to starve. When the asylum closed, the land was sold cheap. The Miller family bought it, unaware of what lay beneath. I found an article from 1954, describing how several children went missing near the farm. Locals whispered about things in the barn. The sheriff at the time dismissed it as superstition. But there were no livestock ever kept there. No crops. The farm was just a shell. A place hiding something else. Part 7, The Return. Against every instinct, I went back one final time. Alone. The barn was colder than before, the air damp like a cellar. I approached the hidden door Sandra had shown me. The boards were pried away now, the path open. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe arrogance. But I climbed down the narrow steps into darkness. The smell was overwhelming, decay, rot, something older than death itself. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. What I saw will never leave me. The underground room was lined with cages. Old, rusted, human-sized. Inside were bones, dozens of them. Some looked decades old. Others, newer. And in the far corner, a hole in the earth. A black tunnel leading deeper. From it came the sound. That horrible, wet breathing. I didn't wait to see more. I ran, tripping over bones, scrambling up the stairs. As I fled, I swear I heard something moving behind me. Something crawling fast. When I reached the night air, I didn't stop running until I was back in my car that I tried to publish the story. The paper refused. They said it was too outlandish. The police denied everything. Sandra disappeared a month later. Her house was found empty, her car still in the driveway. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. The last call she made was to me. I still have the voicemail. In it, she whispers, panicked. It's in my house. Jonathan, it followed me. After that, silence that I left Bellbrook and never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That ragged, wet breathing. Sometimes I dream of Thomas, standing in the barn doorway, reaching out, his mouth opening to scream but no sound coming out. And sometimes I wake to find new scratches on my apartment walls. Symbols like the ones in the barn. The police still list Thomas and Sandra as missing persons. Ryan was committed to a psychiatric facility after attempting to take his own life. And me? I don't tell this story often. People think it's just another urban legend. But I know the truth. Something lives under Miller's farm. Something that was fed for decades. And it's still hungry.
It was the summer of 1998 when Erica Johnson, a 22-year-old college student from Wisconsin, decided to take a road trip with her two friends, Mike and Sophie. They were headed toward Lake Superior, chasing adventure and a break from city life. Instead of taking the main highway, Mike suggested a shortcut he had read about in an old hunting magazine, an isolated dirt road that cut through the dense northern forests. Locals, he claimed, had once used it to reach abandoned logging camps. They drove for hours, the road growing narrower, trees closing in like walls, their cell phones losing signal until they were useless. The forest felt ancient, dark even in daylight and eerily silent. By dusk, their car sputtered and died. No gas station, no houses, nothing, only woods. That was when they spotted it. A wooden sign, barely visible under moss and vines. Miller's cabin 2 miles. Desperate for shelter, they followed the path. The cabin looked like something pulled out of a nightmare. Its wood was blackened with age, windows cracked, roof sagging under years of neglect. Yet, strangely, there was smoke curling from the stone chimney. Someone was living there. An old man answered the door. His eyes were pale, almost white, and his smile seemed forced, stretched too wide. He introduced himself as Mr. Miller, claiming his family had lived there for generations. Against their better judgment, the trio accepted his invitation to stay the night. Inside, the air was thick with a metallic smell, like rust or blood. The walls were lined with animal skulls, jars of preserved meat, and photographs of hunters posing with kills. But one photo caught Erica's attention. It showed 3 young people, 2 women and a man, standing in front of the very same cabin. The photo was dated 1979. The problem? The people in the photo looked almost exactly like Erica, Mike, and Sophie. That night, Erica woke to whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the voices were inside the cabin. She followed the sound to a locked door at the end of the hall. Peering through the keyhole, she saw movement. Dozens of eyes stared back at her. Not reflections. Eyes. Human eyes. Suddenly, the old man's voice came from behind her. "You shouldn't be here." He grabbed her wrist with unnatural strength. His nails were black, jagged. Erica screamed, waking Mike and Sophie. In the chaos, Miller disappeared into the woods, leaving the door unlocked. When they opened it, what they found would haunt them forever.
Up until that point, I hadn't gone down to the basement. The landlord said it was just old storage, nothing useful. But after the messages, I needed answers. The basement stairs creaked under my weight as I descended. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, my flashlight revealed a concrete floor, damp walls, and something else. Symbols. Carved into the floor and walls. Circles intersecting, jagged shapes, dozens of them. And in the center of the floor, a stain. Dark brown, irregular, seeping deep into the concrete. I bent down. It wasn't paint. It was blood that I started digging into public records. What I found made me nauseous. The house once belonged to a man named Richard Kessler, a quiet, middle-aged mechanic. In 1994, police discovered that he'd been luring people into his home, transients, runaways, even a young couple, and murdering them in the basement. He confessed to 7 killings, but investigators believed the number was higher. He claimed he was feeding something in the walls. Kessler was found dead in his cell before trial. His throat was slashed open, though no weapon was ever recovered. The house sat empty for years until the landlord bought it cheap. And now, I was living in it. After learning the truth, I tried to leave. I packed my things, loaded them into my car, but the engine wouldn't start. My phone froze. The power in the house cut out. It was like something was keeping me there. That night, the scratching grew violent. Not just in the walls, on the ceiling, the floor, everywhere. I covered my ears, trembling. Then, a whisper. Right beside me. Eric. My name. Clear as day. I spun around. No one there. But when I looked at the wall, new scratches appeared, forming words as I watched. Stay with us. Sleep-deprived and desperate, I set up a camera in my bedroom to record. I couldn't take it anymore. I left everything behind, furniture, clothes, electronics. I walked 5 miles until I reached the highway and hitched a ride to the next town. When I called the landlord to break the lease, he just sighed. Another one, he muttered. They always leave. I asked him why he kept renting it. He laughed bitterly. Because it won't let me sell. It's been 4 years since I left Willow Lane. I never went back. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear it again. The scratching. Sometimes I wake to find new marks on my bedroom walls. And sometimes, in my dreams, I see the shadow standing at the foot of my bed. Waiting.